really show that website in this course, but all of you get the whole idea. You can cause a lot of damage using the go to URL option. Next comes the key manager, using which you can press keys on the victim's computer or victim's keyboard. Or you can disable keys as well. So you can disable specific keys, like the A key will stop working on the victim's computer, but all the other keys will work. Or you can simply choose to disable all the keys on the victim's keyboard so that it's completely unusable. And finally, there is a file manager, using which you can download files from the victim's computer, upload files to the victim's computer, and even delete files from the victim's computer. So as you can clearly see, Trojans are extremely dangerous software, and I'm sure that many of you are now wondering, number one, how to actually use a Trojan to infect somebody else's computer, and number two, how to protect yourself against Trojans. So don't worry, we'll be discussing both these things now. If I go back to the various steps of using a Trojan, we can one by one discuss each step. So whenever you download a Trojan, like I had mentioned, every Trojan has two parts. There's an attacker part, and then there's a victim part. The attacker part is not dangerous at all. So when you run the attacker part of the Trojan on your computer, nothing will happen to your computer does not get infected. But if you run the victim part on your computer, then even your computer gets infected and some other hacker can actually start controlling your computer. So be very careful, only run the attacker part of the Trojan on your computer. So the question here is, step number one, how to infect the victim with a Trojan. So the first option is, of course, if you have physical access to the victim's computer, then nothing like it. If the victim is your friend, then you can always find some excuse to use his computer or go to his house, and maybe you're watching some movie together on his laptop, and then when he's not looking, you can secretly install a Trojan on his laptop. So that's one way of infecting a Trojan, or infecting somebody else's computer with a Trojan. The second technique is file attachment or file transfer. So you can actually take a Trojan and just attach it to an email or upload it to some website or transfer it through some chat transfer and hope that the victim opens the attachment. However, nowadays most people are very aware, so they would not actually fall for this trick and will not just open some random file. Which is why nowadays you have something known as exe binders. Exe binders. Now exe binders are actually special software that allow you to combine two different exe files together. So you take maybe a calculator, or maybe the Windows Paint, or maybe your friend's favorite game, and you take a Trojan, and using an exe binder software, you combine the two files together. And then you send it to the victim, saying that, dude, I found a full version of your favorite game. Check it out. And when your friend opens that exe file, the game will run normally. But secretly in the background, the Trojan will also get executed, and your friend's computer gets infected with that Trojan. So there won't be any notification, there won't be any warning or anything like that, because you have binded the two exe files together. Both of them get executed by just a single execution. And I'll share with you some exe binders very soon, but that's a very common way of infecting the victim with a Trojan. So these three are the most common ways. There's yet another way where you could actually take a pen drive or a USB drive, or maybe a CD, and you can actually copy the Trojan onto the pen drive or CD, and then gift that CD or pen drive to the victim as maybe a Diwali gift or a Christmas gift or a New Year's gift or a birthday gift. And as soon as the victim puts the USB or the CD or connects it to their computer, using the auto run script, you can actually execute some kind of animation, and also the Trojan simultaneously. So that's another way of infecting the victim with a Trojan. Second step is you got to find out the victim's IP address. I'm not going to discuss this again because in the previous lectures in this AFCH course, we've already discussed a wide variety of different ways in which you can actually find out somebody else's IP address. Step number 3 is pretty straightforward. Open the attacker part of the Trojan on your computer, which essentially means you double click on that Trojan file. So let me show that to you. So if you look at the screen, this is the NetBus attacker part. I double click on it and the attacker part runs on my computer. And in this space provided, I type in the IP address of the victim. And then I click on the connect button and I'm able to actually connect to the victim's computer. So that is essentially step number 3 and step number 4 of using a Trojan. So step 3, step 4 are pretty straightforward. The most difficult part is, of course, infecting the victim with a Trojan. So now that you kind of understand what a Trojan is, how to use a Trojan, we have seen a demonstration of a Trojan as well. Let us see some ways in which you can actually infect the victim's computer with a Trojan. So the most common way, like I had mentioned, is exe binders. And I like to share with all of you some software that work as exe binders and allow you to combine 2 exe files together. The first software is a software called Elite Wrap. Elite Wrap. Then you have Advanced File Joiner. Advanced File Joiner. And then you have Cryptomatic. All these 3 tools are actually available as a free download on the internet. So if you just do a quick Google search, you should be able to download these tools from the internet. Another way in using which you can actually hide a Trojan or make it harder for the victim to detect the Trojan is using something known as self-extracting archives. So there's a software called WinRAR. WinRAR, many of you would be using it to open zip files. It can be used to create a compressed archive that runs itself or executes itself when opened without requiring any decompression tool. So you can use WinRAR to create this .sfx file and then send that to the victim. And you can claim that, oh, it's a compressed file or something like that. But actually inside it, it's a Trojan. And the moment the victim double clicks on it, the Trojan will get executed. As simple as that. So we have seen the 4 simple steps of using a Trojan. But let us talk about the challenges of using a Trojan. So even if you execute these 4 simple steps, there are various challenges that come into the picture. What is the number 1 challenge? It's an antivirus software. What if the victim is using an antivirus software? So the moment you try to infect the victim's computer, the antivirus software will set off an alarm and will warn the victim that the file that they're trying to open is infected with a Trojan, and you will not be able to infect the victim's computer. So the antivirus software is the number 1 challenge to using a Trojan. The second challenge is that you need to find out IP address of victim. Right? Without knowing the IP address of the victim, you will not be able to connect to the victim's computer, even if you successfully manage to infect the victim's computer with a Trojan. There's yet another challenge associated with using Trojans. And the challenge is dynamic IP addresses. Now, even if you are able to find out the IP address of the victim, what if the IP address is a dynamic IP address, which means that it keeps changing? So what do you do if you want to use a Trojan to control the victim's computer, but the victim has a dynamic IP address? So in that case, you will need to again and again keep finding out the victim's IP address. Each time the victim disconnects from the internet and reconnects, you'll have to again find out the victim's IP address. So that's a big problem. It's a big challenge, because finding out somebody else's IP address again and again is not that easy. Right? So Trojans are very dangerous software, but there are 3 challenges that are associated with them, which I've just listed on the screen. So let us now see how you can bypass these 3 challenges. Let's tackle the antivirus problem first. Now, to be very honest, the Trojan that I showed you, NetBus, is actually a pretty old Trojan. It's been around for many, many years. It's a classic Trojan which has all the features of a Trojan, which is why I gave a demonstration of NetBus, but it is easily detected by an antivirus software. So I would recommend that you don't use it. Let us now talk about how to avoid detection by an antivirus software. So nowadays, the latest forms of Trojans are known as FUD Trojans. FUD Trojans. The full form of FUD Trojan is Fully Undetectable Trojans. Fully Undetectable Trojans or FUD Trojans. Now, FUD Trojans are Trojans that, as of now, do not get detected by antivirus software. There is no guarantee in the future whether it will get detected by antivirus software or not, but as of now, it will not get detected by antivirus software. And a very good example of a FUD Trojan is a software called Lost Door. Lost Door. It is available as a free download if you just do a Google search, or you can go to this website lost-door.blogspot.in. So they basically keep changing the website address. So if this website address doesn't work, please just do a Google search and you can download the latest version of Lost Door. So what exactly is Lost Door? Lost Door is a fully undetectable Trojan. Actually, in reality, it is not a Trojan. It's a software that allows you to create your own Trojan. So using Lost Door, you can choose the various options that you want your Trojan to have, and you can build your own Trojan from scratch. And since you are building or creating your own Trojan from scratch, and then you're sending it to the victim, the chances of that file getting detected by an antivirus is limited. Because typically how antiviruses work is the following. Typically an antivirus will have a database of all known signatures of viruses and Trojans. So there's a database of all known signatures of viruses and Trojans. However, if you have created your own Trojan from scratch, the signature of the Trojan is going to be unique, will be different, and it may not exist in the database of known signatures. So as a result, the chances of the Trojan getting detected by antivirus software is limited. Another way in which antivirus software detect Trojans is based on behavior. Now, behavior-based detection is much harder to counteract. However, most of the occasions, if you use Lost Door, you will not have a problem in terms of detection by antivirus software. So let me give you a demonstration of Lost Door on my laptop. Let's see what the Lost Door FUD Trojan looks like and how easy it is for you to create your own Trojan using Lost Door. I hope I have it on my computer. Yep. So let me quickly open up Lost Door on my computer. So if all of you look at the screen, this is what Lost Door looks like. It's just a blank gray screen. you have to click on this Create Server button. The Create Server button is on the left bottom corner, the first button in the bottom panel. As soon as you click on that button, Lost Door will give you various options of what kind of Trojan you want to create. Right? Then you can, the various control panel on the right, you can basically disable the firewall on the victim's computer. You can add yourself to the firewall on the victim's computer. You can activate the keylogger, enable some error messages. You can choose to run the Trojan automatically at startup by clicking on this registry button. You can choose to enter any name for the Trojan. So I can call it Ankit Fadia if I want. But in reality, don't put Ankit Fadia or your own name as the Trojan. Instead, I would recommend that you use a name like System64DLL, so that the victim thinks that it is some kind of system file. So even if the victim detects the file, they will not delete it, they will not remove it, thinking that it's a system file. Then you can choose the folder name in which this Trojan gets installed. So you can use system files or some folder name like that. Then you can generate specific registry keys that you want to create on the victim's computer. Then where do you want to install to? How will the Trojan spread? And then finally you click on the Build Server button. So once you click on Build Server, Lost Door will actually create an exe file for you. And that exe file becomes a victim part of the Trojan that you then send to the victim and infect his computer. And since you have created your own victim part of the Trojan from scratch, the probability of it getting detected by an antivirus is much lower. Again, there's nothing known as 100%, not getting detected by antivirus software, but the probability of the chances will definitely increase. So we have just figured out how to get rid of the first problem associated with using Trojans, which is antivirus software. So let's get rid of this challenge. Next comes the next challenge, which is how to find out the IP address of the victim. Now that challenge is actually a big problem, right? And I would say that even the third challenge is kind of related, right? The second challenge is you got to keep finding out the IP address of the victim, and it could also be a dynamic IP, right? Because then whenever the victim disconnects and reconnects, the IP address will change. So how will you keep finding out the IP address of the victim? How will you, so that you can continue to connect to the victim's computer? So this is a very important challenge, and let us see how you can actually circumvent this challenge. And the solution, to be honest, lies within Lost Door itself. And before I discuss the solution with all of you, I like all of you to think about the solution. See, the problem is, if you have infected the victim's computer with a Trojan, you need to find out the victim's IP address so that your computer can connect to the victim's computer. So that is the problem. And finding out somebody else's IP address is not always that easy. So what could potentially be the solution? Any thoughts, any suggestions, any ideas? See, the solution is actually very simple. In NetBus or a regular Trojan, what happens is, criminal infects victim with Trojan, criminal finds out victim's IP address, and criminal connects to the victim's computer, right? But in Lost Door, something slightly different happens. In Lost Door, what happens is, criminal infects victim's computer, and then victim's computer connects to criminal's computer. So if you reverse it, in a regular Trojan, that is the criminal, connects to victim's computer, but in Lost Door, the victim's computer connects to the criminal. So by reversing the connection path, you have completely removed the problem of finding out the IP address of the victim. And lost door allows you to do that. Because let me go back to the server builder of lost door, and if you look very carefully, there is this option which says IP address. So over here, it is asking you to enter the IP address of the criminal. So let me type my computer's IP address over here. And then I will click on the build server button. So basically, when you're building the Trojan, when you're creating the Trojan, inside the Trojan itself, you're entering your computer's IP address. And then you send that server or send that Trojan to the victim. And the victim's computer gets infected. And whenever the victim has internet access, the Trojan already knows the criminal's IP address. As a result, secretly in the background, the Trojan will connect from the victim's computer to the criminal's computer, without the criminal having to do anything. The criminal doesn't need to find out the victim's IP address. The criminal doesn't need to connect to the victim's computer, because the victim's computer, as soon as it has internet access, the Trojan already knows the criminal's IP address, so the victim will connect to the criminal's computer. So the second problem of finding out the IP address of the victim is no longer there. Even if the victim has a dynamic IP address, it doesn't matter, because you never need to find out the victim's IP, you never need to connect to the victim is connecting to you. So we have just gotten rid of the two challenges of using Trojans, or three challenges of using Trojans. However, this has led to a new challenge. And the new challenge is, what if criminal has a dynamic IP address? So in other words, the IP address that you have entered into the server builder of lost door, that is the criminal's IP address that you have entered over here, what if that IP address is dynamic? So imagine that today I find out I am the criminal. So criminal today finds out his own IP address, enters it in this space provided, creates the server, and then infects the victim's computer. But the victim gets infected, say, tomorrow. And tomorrow the criminal's IP address will change, because the criminal may have shut down the computer and restarted the computer and reconnected to the internet. And since the IP address has changed, the victim's computer will be trying to connect to this old IP. But now the criminal has a new IP. So we have a new challenge now, which is, what if the criminal has a dynamic IP address? Don't worry. There is a solution to this problem as well. And the solution is very simple. Let me share the solution with all of you. The solution is this very interesting website known as no-ip.com. no-ip.com. This website allows you to create a host name, a permanent host name, for your temporary dynamic IP address at home. In other words, I could go to no-ip.com and I could create a permanent host name or a permanent domain name like ankit.no-ip.com, which will always point to my current IP address, whatever that dynamic temporary current IP address I have. So let me open up this website.